West Virginia stands apart from the rest of the United States when it comes to homeownership costs, not because of a single factor, but because of a rare combination of economic, geographic, and social conditions that quietly work together to keep prices low while still allowing residents to fully own their homes without lifelong debt. One of the biggest reasons West Virginia is the cheapest state to own a home is that housing prices never experience the extreme speculative inflation seen elsewhere. While many states saw home values double or triple in short periods due to investor pressure, remote work hype, and aggressive flipping, West Virginia's housing market remained grounded in local incomes rather than national trends, meaning prices rose slowly and predictably instead of exploding. This stability has created an environment where homes are priced for people who actually live and work there, not for outside investors chasing fast appreciation, which keeps purchase prices realistic and mortgages manageable. Another major factor is land availability combined with low population pressure. West Virginia has more land than it has demand, and unlike fast-growing states where limited space pushes prices upward, much of the state still has abundant residential land, older housing stock, and low competition between buyers, which prevents bidding wars from driving prices out of reach. This abundance also reduces development costs, since builders are not forced to overpay for land or navigate extreme zoning restrictions, and those savings are passed down into lower home prices. Property taxes further reinforce affordability, as they remain among the lowest in the country, meaning homeowners are not punished year after year for simply owning property. Even modest-income households can comfortably cover annual tax bills without stress, making long-term ownership far more sustainable than in states where taxes rise faster than wages. Insurance costs also play a role, since West Virginia avoids many of the risks that drive premiums higher elsewhere. There is no constant threat of hurricanes, large-scale wildfires, or coastal flooding. And while the state has mountainous terrain, the overall risk profile keeps homeowner insurance relatively affordable compared to coastal or disaster-prone regions. Utility costs are another quiet advantage, as energy prices remain low due to local energy production and a housing stock designed for colder climates, which helps homeowners manage monthly expenses even after purchasing a home outright. Labor costs also influence affordability, because repair work, renovations, and routine maintenance cost far less than in states where skilled labor is scarce or priced for luxury markets. Homeowners can fix roofs, update plumbing, or improve insulation without the five-figure bills common elsewhere, which makes buying an older home a practical and affordable option rather than a financial gamble. The age of West Virginia's housing stock, often seen as a drawback in hotter markets, is actually an advantage here, since older homes tend to be priced lower and built on larger lots, allowing buyers to get more space for less money while still maintaining structural durability that modern low-cost builds often lack. Unlike states where new construction dominates and sets artificially high price floors, West Virginia's market includes a wide range of modest, functional homes that were built for long-term living rather than short-term resale value. Income expectations also shape the market in a way that favors buyers, because sellers price homes based on what local buyers can realistically afford, rather than chasing national averages that do not reflect regional wages. This alignment between wages and housing prices is rare in modern America, where many states have seen housing costs decouple completely from local earnings, forcing residents into lifelong renting or extreme debt. In West Virginia, it is still possible for a single-income household to buy and fully pay off a home without extraordinary financial sacrifice, especially when compared to states where even high earners struggle to enter the housing market. Another overlooked factor is the absence of aggressive institutional buying. Large investment firms have largely ignored West Virginia because rapid appreciation and high rents are harder to extract in a market focused on local affordability, which has protected everyday buyers from competing against cash-heavy corporations. This lack of institutional pressure keeps prices closer to real value rather than speculative value, preserving the possibility of true ownership rather than perpetual financing. Additionally, lifestyle expectations play a role in keeping costs down, as West Virginia does not cater to luxury-driven housing trends that inflate prices elsewhere. Homes are built and sold for function, comfort, and longevity rather than status, which reduces unnecessary cost layering tied to branding, aesthetics, or exclusivity. Transportation costs are also lower for homeowners, as many residents live close to work, family, and daily necessities, reducing the need for long commutes or expensive infrastructure, which indirectly supports housing affordability by lowering overall household expenses. When all of these elements combine stable pricing, low taxes, affordable insurance, manageable utilities, low maintenance costs, limited investor interference, and realistic income alignment, they create a housing environment where owning a home is not an elite achievement but a normal part of life. This is why West Virginia remains the cheapest state to own a home, not because it lacks value, but because its housing system has resisted the forces that turned homeownership into a luxury elsewhere, preserving a market where paying off a house is still a realistic goal rather than a distant dream. Another reason West Virginia continues to hold the title of the cheapest state to own a home is the way its economic structure naturally supports long-term ownership instead of short-term speculation, creating a housing environment that rewards stability rather than constant turnover. Unlike states whose economies are dominated by volatile industries or boom and bust cycles tied to tourism, tech, or finance, West Virginia's economy is slower moving and deeply rooted in essential sectors, which reduces sudden population spikes that normally drive housing shortages and price surges. This slower pace means demand grows gradually, allowing housing supply to keep up without creating artificial scarcity. And that balance directly translates into lower purchase prices for buyers. Another key factor is how credit and financing realities play out in the state. Because home prices are lower to begin with, buyers are less dependent on high-risk mortgage products, adjustable rates, or extreme leverage, which protects the market from the kind of financial instability that causes crashes elsewhere and keeps prices from rebounding sharply afterward. When homes are affordable enough to be purchased with conventional financing or even paid off early, there is less pressure to inflate prices simply to justify loan structures, keeping values grounded in reality. West Virginia also benefits from a housing culture that prioritizes ownership over renting, which changes how homes are valued. In many states, homes are priced based on how much rent they can generate for landlords. But in West Virginia, properties are more often valued based on livability and long-term use, not maximum rental yield. This cultural difference matters because rent-driven pricing almost always pushes home values upward, whereas owner-focused markets tend to remain more affordable. Infrastructure costs further reinforce this dynamic, as many West Virginia communities already have established roads, utilities, and public services in place, eliminating the need for expensive new development projects that often get passed on to buyers in the form of higher home prices. Older neighborhoods with existing infrastructure allow homes to be sold at prices that reflect the structure itself rather than bundled development costs, which keeps ownership attainable for average households. Another overlooked reason ownership costs remain low is the state's regulatory environment, which tends to be less burdensome for homeowners. Permitting, property compliance, and renovation requirements are generally simpler and less expensive than in states with dense regulatory frameworks, allowing buyers to maintain and improve homes without excessive fees, delays, or professional service costs. This makes owning a home less financially intimidating over time, especially for first-time buyers or retirees on fixed incomes. West Virginia's housing affordability is also reinforced by demographic trends that discourage rapid price escalation. Population growth is modest and migration patterns are selective rather than overwhelming, meaning new residents are typically seeking affordability and stability rather than luxury or rapid appreciation. These newcomers often integrate into existing communities instead of reshaping markets around high-end demand, which preserves pricing norms rather than disrupting them. The state's geographic layout also plays a subtle but powerful role, as its terrain naturally limits dense urban sprawl, reducing pressure on specific hotspots and spreading housing demand across a wider area, which prevents the kind of concentrated demand that causes prices to skyrocket in narrowly defined markets. At the same time, this geography supports self-sufficiency, with many homeowners able to grow food, maintain private wells, or rely on alternative heating methods, reducing ongoing costs and making full ownership more financially viable over the long term. Another contributing factor is how West Virginia's job markets interact with housing costs. While wages may be lower than national averages, the gap between income and housing expenses is far smaller than in most states, allowing residents to dedicate a manageable portion of earnings to homeownership instead of being forced to rent indefinitely. This income-to-housing balance is one of the strongest indicators of sustainable affordability, and West Virginia consistently performs well in this area because housing prices never detached from local earning power. Community norms also discourage aggressive price inflation, as many homeowners value continuity and neighbor stability over maximizing resale profits, leading to pricing decisions that reflect fairness rather than market exploitation. This mindset reduces the frequency of dramatic price jumps that often ripple through markets when sellers chase peak valuations. Additionally, the absence of luxury-driven redevelopment protects affordability. Without widespread pressure to replace modest homes with upscale housing, the market retains a diverse inventory of entry-level properties that keep ownership accessible to new buyers. Even when homes are updated or renovated, improvements are typically practical rather than extravagant, which limits cost escalation and keeps resale prices within reach of local buyers. The result of all these forces working together is a housing ecosystem where ownership remains achievable, predictable, and financially sustainable, allowing residents to build equity without being trapped by debt or rising costs. West Virginia's affordability is not an accident or a temporary condition. It is the outcome of structural factors that favor long-term residents over speculative interests, making the state uniquely positioned as the cheapest place in the country to truly own a home rather than simply finance one indefinitely. What truly separates West Virginia from every other state when it comes to homeownership affordability is how low ownership costs remain after the purchase, which is where many so-called affordable states quietly become expensive over time. But West Virginia does the opposite by keeping the long-term financial burden of owning a home unusually light. One of the biggest hidden expenses of homeownership nationwide is property taxation, and in West Virginia, this cost remains among the lowest in the country, meaning homeowners are not punished year after year simply for staying in the same house as values rise. In many states, even modest appreciation can translate into dramatic tax increases that slowly push long-term residents out. But in West Virginia, taxes tend to stay predictable and manageable, allowing homeowners to plan their finances without fear of sudden cost spikes. Insurance costs follow a similar pattern, as the state is largely insulated from the natural disasters that drive premiums sky-high elsewhere. There is no routine exposure to hurricanes, coastal flooding, wildfires, or large-scale seismic risk, which keeps insurance pricing grounded and makes full coverage attainable even for lower-income households. Utility costs further strengthen the affordability equation, especially for homeowners who use alternative heating methods or live in smaller, energy-efficient homes. Many households benefit from regional energy availability and housing stock that was built for efficiency rather than excess, which translates into lower monthly expenses long after the mortgage is gone. Maintenance costs are also more manageable because the housing stock, while often older, is typically simpler in design, with fewer luxury features that require specialized repairs or high-cost replacement parts. This simplicity allows homeowners to perform basic upkeep themselves or hire local labor at reasonable rates, avoiding the premium pricing common in states where construction and repair costs are inflated by labor shortages and strict licensing barriers. Another major factor is land-to-home value balance. In West Virginia, a significant portion of a property's value is often tied to the structure itself rather than the land beneath it, which reduces speculative pressure and prevents runaway appreciation that would otherwise increase taxes, insurance, and resale expectations. This balance keeps ownership practical rather than financialized, meaning homes are treated as places to live first and investments second. The cultural approach to housing also plays a role in keeping ownership costs down, as communities tend to value long-term residency and personal responsibility over constant upgrades or cosmetic trends that drive unnecessary spending. Homeowners are less likely to feel pressure to remodel purely to keep up with market expectations, which keeps personal debt low and preserves affordability over decades. West Virginia's affordability is further reinforced by its slower appreciation cycles, which protect homeowners from being priced out of their own neighborhoods. While values may rise gradually, they do not typically jump at a pace that outstrips income growth, allowing ownership to remain stable across generations rather than becoming a short-term privilege. This stability is especially important for retirees and fixed-income households who can own their homes outright without worrying that rising costs will force them back into the rental market later in life. Another often overlooked element is how community infrastructure supports low-cost living, with many towns offering essential services within short distances, reducing transportation costs and minimizing the need for expensive commuting. When daily life does not require long drives, toll roads, or constant fuel expenses, the overall cost of owning a home drops even further, making the state especially attractive to people seeking a simpler and more affordable lifestyle. West Virginia's housing affordability also benefits from limited external investor influence because the market does not offer the rapid appreciation or high rents that attract large-scale institutional buyers. Local residents face less competition when purchasing homes, keeping prices anchored to local realities instead of national investment strategies. This absence of aggressive investor activity prevents bidding wars, cash-driven price inflation, and the conversion of owner-occupied housing into short-term rentals, all of which drive ownership costs up in other states. The state's zoning and land use practices also contribute by allowing a wider range of housing types, including modest single-family homes, manufactured housing, and multi-use properties, which expands the pool of affordable ownership options rather than restricting supply to high-end developments. Over time, this flexibility ensures that affordable homes continue to exist rather than being replaced entirely by higher-priced alternatives. All of these factors compound into a rare scenario where owning a home in West Virginia does not become more expensive the longer you stay, but instead becomes easier as mortgages are paid down and costs remain stable. For many residents, this means true financial security rather than perpetual housing anxiety, which is increasingly rare in the modern housing market. West Virginia's distinction as the cheapest state to own a home is therefore not just about low purchase prices, but about an entire ownership life cycle that remains affordable from the first payment to full ownership and beyond, making it one of the few places left where buying a home can still be a long-term solution rather than a long-term burden. The final reason West Virginia stands apart as the cheapest state to own a home is not tied to a single statistic or cost category, but to how all of these factors interact to create an ownership environment that resists the financial traps common elsewhere in the country, especially over long time horizons. In many states, buyers may secure a low purchase price only to face escalating costs that quietly erode affordability through rising taxes, insurance premiums, utility rates, maintenance inflation, and lifestyle-driven spending pressures. But West Virginia breaks that pattern by keeping nearly every ownership-related expense grounded in local income realities rather than national market speculation. One of the clearest examples of this is how wages and housing costs remain aligned. While incomes may not be among the highest nationally, housing expenses are scaled accordingly, preventing the imbalance seen in states where residents earn average wages but face elite-level housing costs. This alignment allows homeowners to build equity without sacrificing other financial priorities, such as healthcare, savings, or debt reduction, which is critical for long-term stability. Another overlooked advantage is how forgiving the market is for non-traditional buyers, including first-time homeowners, retirees, remote workers, and self-employed individuals who often struggle to compete in hotter markets dominated by high-income professionals and institutional buyers. In West Virginia, buyers are less likely to be locked out by aggressive bidding wars or forced to waive inspections, contingencies, or financial safeguards just to secure a home, which reduces the risk of costly surprises after purchase. The state's slower-paced market also gives buyers time to make informed decisions rather than rushing into purchases driven by fear of missing out, which is a major contributor to overpaying in other regions. Over time, this calmer environment leads to healthier ownership outcomes, fewer foreclosures, and more sustainable household finances. West Virginia's affordability is further reinforced by how housing interacts with daily living costs beyond the property itself. Groceries, services, healthcare access, and local labor costs tend to remain reasonable, meaning homeowners are not forced to offset high housing expenses by cutting corners elsewhere. This balance allows people to actually enjoy homeownership rather than treating it as a constant financial stressor. Transportation costs also play a significant role, as many residents live closer to where they work or rely less on long daily commutes, which reduces fuel, vehicle wear, and time-related costs that often go unaccounted for in housing affordability discussions. When combined with lower insurance and maintenance expenses, this creates a monthly budget structure that remains predictable and resilient even during broader economic uncertainty. Another critical element is how West Virginia's housing market responds to downturns. While prices may soften during national slowdowns, the absence of extreme price run-ups means owners are less exposed to sudden equity losses that trap homeowners in negative positions. This resilience protects long-term owners and discourages speculative behavior that destabilizes markets elsewhere. Even during periods of national volatility, ownership in West Virginia tends to remain functional rather than fragile, which is essential for households planning to stay put for many years. The social fabric of communities also reinforces affordability, as many areas prioritize neighborly cooperation, informal support networks, and shared resources that reduce the need for paid services. Whether it's shared tools, local repair knowledge, or community-based problem-solving, these informal systems lower the real cost of ownership in ways that never appear in official statistics but make a meaningful difference in daily life. Additionally, the cultural emphasis on practicality over prestige helps homeowners resist lifestyle inflation that often accompanies ownership in more image-driven markets where pressure to upgrade, renovate, or expand becomes a financial burden rather than a choice. In West Virginia, owning a home is still widely viewed as a foundation for stability, not a status symbol, which keeps spending priorities grounded. Over decades, this mindset compounds into real financial advantages, allowing homeowners to reach mortgage-free living earlier and maintain it without constant cost creep. When all these elements are considered together, it becomes clear that West Virginia's position as the cheapest state to own a home is not accidental or temporary, but the result of structural, cultural, and economic conditions that reinforce each other over time. Ownership here remains accessible not just at the point of purchase, but throughout the entire lifespan of the home, from first payment to full payoff and beyond. In a housing landscape increasingly defined by volatility, speculation, and financial strain, West Virginia stands as one of the last places where owning a home can still mean security, predictability, and genuine affordability, making it uniquely positioned for those seeking long-term homeownership rather than short-term market gains.